The congressional chamber grew silent as former Attorney General Bill Barr leaned toward his microphone, his face tight with anger. "Representative Crockett, what you just said is entirely false," he declared, his voice sharp in the stillness. "You are misleading the American people, and I refuse to sit here and allow it." Yet Jasmine Crockett, the freshman congresswoman from Texas, showed no reaction. A faint smile touched her lips as she reached for a manila folder that had rested on her desk throughout the hearing. What unfolded in the next 30 seconds would send shock waves through Washington and leave one of the Capitol's most established figures speechless. This was no ordinary congressional session. It was the moment a 42-year-old representative prepared to reveal truths Barr had worked to keep hidden for decades. The evidence she was about to present would not only undermine his testimony but threaten the very foundation of his career. Before we dive into this high-stakes exchange, remember to hit subscribe and ring the notification bell so you never miss critical moments like these. Share in the comments where you're tuning in from. And let's get into the story Washington insiders are calling one of the most damaging confrontations in recent congressional history. Voiceover. Before diving into this high-stakes exchange, remember to hit subscribe and ring the notification bell so you never miss critical moments like these. Share in the comments where you're tuning in from. And let's get into the story Washington insiders are calling one of the most damaging confrontations in recent congressional history. Don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more in-depth political analysis and coverage of the events shaping our democracy. Tap the notification bell so you never miss a story, and share your thoughts in the comments below. Who else should be held accountable? What other truths must be uncovered? Your voice matters. Together, we can ensure that those in power are held to the same standards as everyone else. They may hold power, but we hold the truth. William Barr stood as a towering figure in the political establishment. At 73, he had served twice as Attorney General, once under George H.W. Bush and later under Donald Trump. Known for his legal expertise and loyalty to executive authority, Barr's reputation was that of a skilled constitutional lawyer and a seasoned Washington operator. A Yale graduate with decades of influence in conservative legal circles, he had faced tough questioning before and built a career on avoiding accountability through careful language and measured composure. But this time, across from him stood Jasmine Crockett, a first-term lawmaker with the determination of someone who had made her name fighting in Texas courtrooms as a civil rights attorney and public defender. Crockett was no political heir or Ivy League insider. She had earned her reputation representing those without means, challenging systems built to shield the powerful. She understood how to use evidence to dismantle even the most entrenched opponents. This wasn't merely two individuals facing off. It was a symbolic clash between Washington's old guard and a younger generation demanding accountability. The stated purpose of the hearing was to examine the Justice Department's handling of investigations during the Trump era. But everyone knew the real subject, uncovering what happened behind closed doors in some of the nation's most disputed moments. For Barr, the hearing was expected to serve as a chance to restore his reputation after the turbulence of the Trump years. He arrived with prepared responses, anticipating the usual party line exchanges. What he hadn't expected was someone armed with documents meant to remain hidden. For Crockett, this was her chance to prove she wasn't another new member easily dismissed by Washington insiders. She had spent weeks preparing, following trails overlooked by others, and building a case with the precision of a trial lawyer. She understood that directly challenging Barr carried risks, but she also knew that truth often required such risks. The hearing room was filled with reporters, cameras, and operatives from both sides. C-SPAN broadcasted every moment while social media trended with tags like #BarrHearing and #CrockettVsBarr. Everyone sensed a pivotal moment was near, though few anticipated just how explosive it would be. For the first hour, the hearing proceeded smoothly. Barr handled questions with his usual evasions, repeating phrases like, "I don't recall that specific conversation," giving himself room to avoid direct accountability. Then it was Crockett's turn. She leaned into her microphone, steady and confident. "Mr. Barr," she began, "in prior testimony, you claimed you had no knowledge of pressure on prosecutors in the Roger Stone case. Do you still hold that position?" Barr adjusted slightly in his chair, his voice calm. "Representative, as I've said repeatedly, the decisions in the case were guided solely by prosecutorial judgment and the pursuit of justice." "Interesting," Crockett replied, sliding a paper from her folder. "Because here I have an email dated February 11, 2020, from the lead prosecutor in the Stone case. Would you like me to read it aloud? Barr's expression tightened, though his composure held. I'm not certain which email you're referring to. There were numerous communications at the time. Crockett pressed forward, her tone firm. This email, Mr. Barr, states, the Attorney General's office has made it clear the sentencing recommendation must be reduced. This direction is coming from the top. Does that help refresh your memory? His jaw clenched as he leaned closer. Representative, you're taking these words out of context. The department frequently reviews sentencing recommendations. Out of context. Crockett countered sharply. Mr. Barr, 4 career prosecutors withdrew from that case. 4. They weren't political appointees, but professionals who served under both Republican and Democratic administrations. Are you telling this committee their resignations were simply coincidental? The room fell completely silent except for the clicks of cameras. Barr drew a breath, his mind searching for a path out. Representative Crockett, I recognize you're new to Congress, but these types of accusations without proper foundation are inaccurate. Crockett cut in, her voice rising slightly. I'm not making accusations. I'm reading directly from documents provided to this committee by your own former colleagues. Are you suggesting they're lying? It was then Barr made the misstep that would define the exchange. Whether driven by irritation, overconfidence, or the assumption that his authority remained untouchable, he leaned into the microphone and delivered words that would seal his downfall. Representative Crockett, what you're doing here is exactly what I would expect from someone with your limited experience. You're misrepresenting facts, fabricating evidence for political points, and frankly, it is beneath the dignity of this chamber. Audible gasps came from the gallery. Several Democrats on the committee looked stunned while Republicans shifted uncomfortably in their seats. The chairman raised his gavel, but before he could intervene, Crockett lifted her hand. Mr. Barr, she said, her voice calm but firm, did you just accuse me of lying? Are you suggesting I fabricated evidence? Barr, realizing he had gone too far but unwilling to retreat, pressed on. I'm saying what you're presenting misrepresents the facts. And yes, I believe you're aware of that. If that makes you a liar, then so be it. The room erupted. The chairman banged his gavel, calling for order. Crockett, however, sat still, a faint smile on her face. She reached for another folder, thicker than the first. When she opened it, members nearby could see it contained official Justice Department files, complete with seals and signatures. Mr. Chairman, Crockett said, her voice rising just enough to be heard, I request a brief recess. It seems Mr. Barr needs time to reconsider his words, especially once he sees what I am about to introduce. The chairman, a seasoned Democrat familiar with political theater, understood the weight of the moment. The committee will recess for 15 minutes, he declared, striking his gavel once again. As people stood and moved about, the real drama unfolded at the witness table. Barr's attorney hurried over, whispering urgently in his ear. Concerned Republican members gathered around. Across the aisle, Democrats surrounded Crockett, though she did not celebrate. Instead, she calmly sorted her documents, preparing for what was certain to be a decisive next step. The media section was buzzing. Reporters typed rapidly, pushing out breaking alerts. Headlines appeared instantly, Barr accuses Representative Crockett of lying in explosive hearing. Social media ignited with trending phrases like #BarMeltdown and #CrockettHasReceipts. Cable news broke into programming to air the heated exchange. But the clearest sign of what was coming was Barr. The man who had entered the hearing full of confidence now sat slouched, pale, and visibly shaken. He shuffled notes with his attorney, shaking his head in disbelief. Meanwhile, Crockett stood by the window, gazing toward the Washington Monument. An aide handed her a phone, showing her something on the screen. She nodded briefly, spoke a few words, and returned to her papers. No celebration, no theatrics, just focused preparation from someone who knew she was about to shift the course of events. As the recess went on, whispers spread across the chamber. Veteran reporters compared notes, trying to guess what evidence Crockett had in hand. The consensus was clear, whatever it was big. I heard she has whistleblower documents, one reporter whispered. No, my source says it's deleted emails, another replied. Whatever the truth, one thing was certain, all eyes were now on Crockett. I've never seen him like this, a third remarked. Indeed, Barr's change was striking. The men who once sparred with Robert Mueller, who endured heavy criticism over the Mueller report, and who stood firm against charges of politicizing the Justice Department, now appeared genuinely uneasy. Several times he reached for his phone as if to call someone, then set it down without dialing. Republican committee members also showed unease. Some whispered in tight circles, exchanging worried looks toward both Barr and Crockett. One senior Republican was overheard saying, "We need to know what she has before this goes further." Yet Crockett revealed nothing. She sat steady at her desk, calmly taking notes on a legal pad. When fellow Democrats approached, she politely but firmly signaled she needed to stay focused. This was her moment, and nothing would pull her off course. When Chairman Johnson called the hearing back to order, the atmosphere had shifted completely. What began as a routine oversight hearing had turned into headline political theater. Major networks carried it live, banners flashing across screens nationwide. "Mr. Barr," Crockett began, her voice controlled yet assured, like a prosecutor confident the case was already won. "Before the break, you accused me of lying and inventing evidence. I'm giving you one chance to retract that." Barr, clearly counseled during the recess, spoke more carefully, though his jaw was tense. "Representative, I stand by my claim that your description is inaccurate and misleading." Crockett nodded. "Very well. Mr. Chairman, I'd like to enter into the record a set of documents that should clarify who is being misleading here." She raised a thick folder as cameras clicked in rapid succession. "Let's begin with this," she said, placing a document on the desk. "This memo, dated January 30, 2020, from your personal files, Mr. Barr. According to Justice Department rules, it should have been preserved. Yet, it never entered the official record. Shall I read it aloud?" Barr's attorney immediately objected. "Mr. Chairman, we haven't reviewed these alleged documents." Crockett cut in firmly. "These were obtained legally through FOIA requests and whistleblower disclosures. They carry Mr. Barr's signature, unless he now claims he doesn't sign his own memos." The chairman turned to Barr. "Do you dispute the authenticity of your signature?" Barr was cornered, and the room knew it. If he denied it, forensic testing could expose him. If he admitted it, the document stood. "I would need to review the document," Barr said cautiously. Crockett smiled, having an aide deliver a copy. All eyes watched as Barr examined it, his complexion paling. "As Mr. Barr reviews," Crockett continued, "let me explain to the American people what it says." In his handwriting, Mr. Barr wrote, spoke with POTUS about stone sentencing. "Must be handled delicately. Need to reduce without appearing to intervene directly." The chamber erupted. Lawmakers talked over one another, reporters shouted, and the chairman struck the gavel, demanding order, but Crockett pressed on. "There's more." For the next 10 minutes, she unveiled document after document, each one more damaging. A text exchange with a White House official on controlling the Mueller report narrative. An email where Barr instructed staff to support the president's positions in ongoing probes. Even a recording of Barr saying, "I don't care what the career prosecutors think. This is what must happen." With each revelation, Barr seemed to shrink further into his chair. His attorney stopped objecting, realizing pushback only drew more attention. "Mr. Barr," Crockett said sharply, "you accused me of lying. Yet every document I've presented today carries your signature, your words, or your direct approval. So I ask again, who is lying to the American people?" Barr finally spoke, though without his earlier authority. "Representative, these documents are being taken out of context. The president has the constitutional authority to—" "What, Mr. Barr?" Crockett cut in. "To interfere in prosecutions of his allies. To use the Justice Department as his personal law firm. Because that's exactly what these documents show. And here's the most significant fact, Mr. Barr." She continued, "Every one of these documents was created after you testified before Congress, claiming no interference occurred. Meaning, you didn't just mislead Congress once. You lied under oath repeatedly while serving as the nation's top law enforcement officer." But Crockett was not finished. She had saved the strongest evidence for the end. "Mr. Chairman, I have one final document to present. This one is especially significant because it's not from Mr. Barr's time as Attorney General under President Trump. It goes back to his earlier role under President Bush." Barr's head lifted, genuine surprise crossing his face for the first time. "You see," Crockett continued, Mr. Barr has a pattern. This document from 1992 shows him doing the same thing: political interference in prosecutions, misleading Congress, and covering it up. The only difference is, back then, we didn't have emails or text messages as proof. We just had memos like this one, where Mr. Barr wrote, Congress doesn't need to know everything we do. Executive privilege covers a multitude of sins. She locked eyes with him. Asterisk a multitude of sins asterisk, Mr. Barr. Your words, not mine. What followed was something Washington insiders would recall for years. William Barr, who had survived countless political battles, faced special counsels, and built a reputation as an unwavering defender of executive power, lowered his eyes. When he looked up again, the defiance was gone, replaced by something that looked very much like defeat. Representative Crockett, he said quietly, his voice barely above a whisper, I would like to consult with my counsel. Of course, Mr. Barr, Crockett replied gently, but before you do, I want everyone here to understand this. This isn't about partisanship. This isn't about political points. This is about the integrity of our justice system. When an attorney general lies to Congress, when he undermines prosecutorial independence for political ends, he doesn't just violate his oath. He betrays every American who believes in the rule of law. As she gathered her papers neatly, Crockett continued, You called me a liar, Mr. Barr, but these documents, your own documents, tell the real story, and that story is of an attorney general who forgot that his duty was to the Constitution, not to any president. As Barr turned to his attorney, the hearing room buzzed with shock, disbelief, and anticipation. Members of both parties sat stunned. Several Republicans who had planned to defend Barr stayed silent, while Democrats tried not to appear too triumphant. Recognizing the historic weight of the moment, the chairman spoke. Given the seriousness of the evidence, this committee will need time to review these documents. Mr. Barr, you remain under oath and will be recalled for further testimony. This hearing is recessed until further notice. The gavel struck, and the room erupted in motion. Reporters rushed toward both Barr and Crockett, shouting questions. Barr's security quickly surrounded him, escorting him out a side door, his attorney close behind. The image of Barr leaving the chamber, looking very much like retreat, would become one of the defining visuals of the entire affair. Crockett, by contrast, remained seated for a moment, allowing herself a brief breath of satisfaction. When she finally stood, she was immediately surrounded by colleagues and journalists. She smiled and said simply, the documents speak for themselves. The American people deserve the truth, and today they received it. Within moments, social media erupted. Crockett destroys Barr shot to the top of trending topics worldwide. The clip of Barr calling Crockett a liar, followed by her dismantling of his credibility, was shared millions of times in the first hour. Users online responded with both creativity and passion. Jasmine Crockett just gave a masterclass in "Keep That Same Energy," one tweet read, amassing hundreds of thousands of likes. Another said, Barr thought he could intimidate a black woman who worked as a public defender. She's faced tougher opponents before her morning coffee. Memes flooded in. One video set Crockett's takedown to superhero movie music. Another edited Barr's shifting expressions to a comedy theme. But alongside the humor, serious debates began about the implications of the evidence. Legal analysts filled the airwaves discussing possible criminal consequences. The term, perjury charges, came up repeatedly. Within hours, Washington's political atmosphere had shifted dramatically. The first clear sign came when 3 Republican senators who had defended Barr released statements creating distance. Senator Johnson of Wisconsin, once a close ally, stated, "The evidence presented today raises serious questions that must be answered. No one is above the law, regardless of position or party." Even more telling was the silence from others who normally would rush to Barr's defense. When asked about the hearing, the president's press secretary said only, "We're reviewing the testimony and have no comment at this time." For an administration usually quick to counter every accusation, that silence was striking. Meanwhile, Democratic leadership sought to channel momentum. Speaker of the House Martinez called an emergency press conference, announcing a formal investigation into Barr's testimony with possible referrals for perjury. What we saw today, Martinez said, was not just the exposure of lies, but a pattern of corruption at the highest levels of our justice system. This cannot and will not be ignored. By evening, the Justice Department faced a historic challenge. The current Attorney General, Sandra Phillips, released a statement saying the department would review the evidence and act if warranted. Everyone understood the unprecedented situation, the Justice Department considering charges against a former Attorney General for actions taken while in office. Legal experts debated possible charges. On CNN, former federal prosecutor Jennifer Rodriguez listed them: perjury, obstruction of Congress, possibly obstruction of justice. Each carries serious prison time. Even conservative outlets struggled to defend Barr. Fox News, initially protective, shifted as legal commentators acknowledged the weight of the evidence. "Look, I've defended Bill Barr," said conservative analyst Mark Stevens, "but if these documents are real, and he hasn't denied them, then this is a serious problem." As Barr regrouped with his legal team, Jasmine Crockett was living a career-defining moment. Her office was overwhelmed with calls from constituents, colleagues, and media worldwide. The freshman representative, once dismissed as too inexperienced to confront Washington's power players, had just taken down one of the most formidable figures in modern American politics. That evening, she appeared on Rachel Maddow's show for an exclusive interview. Maddow, clearly eager, asked the question everyone wanted answered: "How did you obtain these documents?" Crockett's reply was steady and deliberate. "Rachel, many good people in government still believe in the rule of law. When they witness corruption and dishonesty, they want the truth revealed. I simply gave that truth a platform." "But you knew what you had when you entered that hearing," Maddow pressed. "Why allow him to attack you first? Why let him brand you a liar?" Crockett smiled. "Because the public needed to see who he truly was. If I had just shown the documents, it would have become another partisan dispute. But when he attacked me, when he called me dishonest while he was the one misleading the nation, that exposed his character in a way no file ever could." The interview was viewed by millions, and Crockett's calm, logical explanation of her case only strengthened her rising reputation. By night's end, she had gained over 1 million new followers on social media, and analysts were already speculating about her political future. Senator Crockett. Attorney General Crockett, the possibilities seemed endless. Behind the scenes, Republican leadership scrambled. Barr had long been one of their most respected figures, upheld as a model of conservative legal thought. Now they were forced to find ways to distance themselves from him without admitting they had been wrong for years. The most dramatic moment came when Senator Mitchell, the Republican leader, was overheard on a hot mic telling a colleague, "We should have seen this. The warning signs were clear, but we ignored them because he was on our side." That unguarded remark sent shock waves through conservative media. Talk radio hosts who had defended Barr for years were suddenly trying to justify why they hadn't questioned his falsehoods. "We trusted him," one prominent host admitted. "He betrayed that trust." Others in the movement, however, saw an opening. A group of younger Republicans issued a statement calling for a new generation of conservative leadership that prioritized principles over personalities. They even praised Crockett for her dedication to transparency and accountability, values they said should rise above partisanship. 3 days after the hearing, another revelation broke. 2 whistleblowers from inside the Justice Department stepped forward publicly, confirming they had been the sources for many of Crockett's documents. Both were career prosecutors who had served under administrations of both parties. Their choice to go public gave the evidence even more credibility. In a joint 60 Minutes interview, they explained. "We swore an oath to uphold the Constitution," one said, her voice trembling with emotion. "When we saw that oath being violated by the very person meant to protect it, we had no choice but to act." The second, a veteran prosecutor of 30 years, was more blunt. "Bill Barr corrupted the Justice Department. He turned it into a political weapon. Representative Crockett gave us the chance to expose that corruption, and we took it." Their decision sparked new debate about whistleblower protections and government accountability. More Justice Department staff began coming forward with their own accounts of political interference during Barr's tenure. 5 days after the hearing, Barr finally broke his silence with an op-ed in the Wall Street Journal titled, "The Truth About My Service." It was a lengthy attempt to defend and contextualize his actions, but the effort fell flat. Fact-checkers immediately flagged multiple inaccuracies. Even conservative outlets were critical. The National Review wrote, "Barr's defense reads like the desperate justification of a man who knows he has been caught. He should stop digging." Worse still was the response from his former colleagues. Several Justice Department officials contradicted his narrative. His former deputy attorney general delivered a particularly damning rebuke: "I can no longer remain silent. The documents Representative Crockett presented are accurate, and they represent only a fraction of the troubling behavior I witnessed." Beyond immediate political and legal consequences, the Crockett-Barr clash carried deep cultural weight. It came to symbolize generational change, new voices challenging entrenched power, and the importance of preparation and evidence in confronting corruption. Universities began teaching the hearing as a case study in political science and law courses. The Crockett method became shorthand for thorough preparation when facing powerful adversaries. Young women, particularly women of color, saw in Crockett an example of how to stand tall against intimidation and false accusations. The phrase, "but she drops evidence that ends him," turned into a rallying cry on social media, used whenever falsehoods were exposed. Posters with Crockett's image and the words, "I brought receipts," quickly became bestsellers. As weeks passed, the ripple effects widened. The Justice Department launched a sweeping review of prosecutorial decisions made under Barr, revisiting numerous cases potentially tainted by political pressure. Several convictions were reopened. More significantly, there was bipartisan momentum for legislation to safeguard the Justice Department's independence. The Prosecutorial Independence Act, backed by Democrats and reform-minded Republicans, would make it a crime for political appointees to interfere in prosecutorial choices. Crockett became a leading voice in this reform movement. Her follow-up hearings on Justice Department independence drew huge audiences, and her ability to work with Republicans who genuinely wanted reform displayed political maturity beyond her freshman status. As Crockett's influence grew, Barr's world collapsed. His speaking engagements were canceled, his book deal withdrawn, and corporate boards pushed him out. The man once commanding $50,000 for speeches was now largely unwelcome. The rejection from the legal community he had long been part of was perhaps most painful. The Federalist Society, which had once celebrated him, quietly removed his name from its roster of distinguished speakers. His portrait at the Justice Department, normally displayed prominently, was relegated to a back hallway. Former friends and colleagues distanced themselves. One former Supreme Court clerk who had worked closely with him told reporters, "The Bill Barr revealed in that hearing is not the man I thought I knew. Either he changed, or I was blind to who he really was. Either way, it's heartbreaking." The impact stretched globally. Foreign governments skeptical of U.S. claims about the rule of law saw the hearing as proof the system still worked. The European Union's Justice Commissioner issued a statement commending Representative Crockett and the whistleblowers for ensuring truth prevailed over power. Authoritarian states tried to exploit the scandal, with Chinese state media claiming American democracy is just as corrupt as any other system. But most international observers interpreted the exposure of Barr's actions as evidence that, though flawed, U.S. democracy retained mechanisms for accountability. The hearing also sparked a reckoning in the media. Many journalists who had long accepted Barr's statements without scrutiny were forced to confront their lack of deeper investigation. "We gave him the benefit of the doubt when we shouldn't have," admitted one veteran political reporter on a journalism podcast. Representative Crockett had done the investigative work the press had neglected. This ignited a broader debate about access journalism and the tendency of some reporters to avoid pressing powerful figures out of fear of losing access. In response, several leading newspapers introduced new policies requiring thorough fact-checking of statements from public officials, regardless of rank or party. As her influence expanded, Crockett remained cautious not to overreach. She declined most interview requests, choosing carefully when to appear, and consistently kept the focus on reform instead of personal recognition. When asked about her political ambitions, she repeated, "I'm focused on doing the job the people of Texas elected me to do." Still, behind the scenes, she was building a strong coalition for reform. She collaborated with Senator Warren on financial transparency, partnered with Representative Ocasio-Cortez on environmental justice, and even found bipartisan agreement with Republicans on accountability measures. Her once modest and underfunded staff was soon overwhelmed with applications from highly qualified professionals. Crockett was selective in hiring, bringing on staff with both conviction and practical experience. "We're not here to make noise," she reminded her team. "We're here to make change." 6 weeks later, the other shoe dropped. The Justice Department announced a criminal investigation into William Barr's testimony before Congress. The appointment of a special prosecutor, former Judge Maria Santos, underscored the seriousness of the probe. Santos was known for her precision and independence from political influence. Her appointment drew praise across party lines, even from some of Barr's past allies, who expressed confidence she would run a fair inquiry. Barr's legal team immediately mobilized, bringing on some of the top white-collar defense attorneys in the nation. The irony was clear: once the overseer of prosecutions, Barr was now preparing his own defense. The confrontation between Crockett and Barr became the spark for a broader reform movement in government. Other congressional committees began taking a tougher stance on testimony from former officials. With new awareness that documents and evidence could emerge years later, whistleblower protections were expanded, and secure channels were created for reporting misconduct. The so-called Crockett Protocols set informal but influential standards for transparency and record preservation. Young people, motivated by her example, began pursuing public service in large numbers. Law school applications surged, with many citing the hearing as their inspiration. "She showed us that one person, with preparation and courage, can challenge the system," one applicant wrote in a personal statement. A year later, the hearing's impact remained strong. Barr faced indictment for perjury and obstruction of Congress, with a trial set to begin within months. Legal experts widely predicted conviction based on the evidence Crockett had introduced. By then, Crockett had emerged as one of the most influential members of Congress. Despite being in her first term, she chaired a new subcommittee on government accountability and had already passed 3 significant reform bills. Speculation about her potential Senate or presidential run grew, though she consistently deflected such questions. On the anniversary of the hearing, she delivered a speech from the House floor, broadcast nationwide. "A year ago," she began, "I was called a liar by someone who built his career on lies. Today, we have proven that truth, supported by evidence and courage, will always overcome deception and intimidation." She emphasized that the work was not finished, reminding those in power that accountability would continue. The Crockett-Barr clash would be remembered as one of the most consequential congressional hearings of the 21st century. It changed the way oversight was conducted in Congress, how the Justice Department handled accountability, and how Americans viewed the ability to hold powerful officials responsible. For Crockett, it marked the start of what many predicted would be a historic career. Her example demonstrated that determination, preparation, and truth could overcome entrenched power. Her rise inspired countless young people to pursue careers in public service, convinced they could also make a difference. For Barr, it was a dramatic fall from grace. Once regarded as one of the most powerful attorneys general in U.S. history, he now faced the prospect of spending the rest of his life in prison. His legacy, once tied to conservative legal theory and executive power, was overshadowed by corruption and lies exposed by a freshman lawmaker. Years later, the hearing's effects were still felt. Reforms rooted in the Crockett Protocols reshaped government operations, dismantling a culture of impunity where officials could mislead Congress without consequence. The Crockett Standard became shorthand for rigorous preparation and documented evidence in oversight hearings. Law schools dedicated courses to examining the hearing's legal and political lessons. The footage of Barr branding Crockett a liar, followed by her meticulous dismantling of his credibility, became one of the most studied exchanges in modern political history. Scholars examined how it shifted Washington's balance of power, weakening the networks that had shielded elites for decades. New voices, particularly women and people of color, rose into positions of leadership. Beyond political and legal outcomes, the hearing revealed something deeper about human nature and American democracy. It proved that courage, coupled with preparation and evidence, could defeat arrogance and corruption. It demonstrated that no individual, regardless of power, stands above the law when citizens demand accountability. Crockett entered the hearing as an underestimated freshman lawmaker. She left as a symbol of justice, inspiring others to confront dishonesty and abuse in their own communities. Barr entered believing his power shielded him from consequences. He left disgraced, his career defined by deception. His downfall became a warning to anyone tempted to misuse authority. Truth has a way of surfacing, and no reputation can protect against it. The story of William Barr accusing Jasmine Crockett of lying, only to be undone by her evidence, became more than a political scandal. It evolved into a modern morality tale, a reminder that truth and justice, while sometimes delayed, cannot be permanently denied. For young people, it was proof that they could effect change without tolerating corruption. For those in authority, it was a warning that accountability is inevitable. The hearing was proof that democracy's mechanisms, though slow and imperfect, still function when people summon the courage to use them. Though the hearing itself lasted only hours, its influence endures across generations. It showed that in the struggle between truth and falsehood, courage and intimidation, evidence and empty claims, truth, when supported by preparation, always prevails. As we reflect on this historic event, we are reminded that democracy requires vigilance and the willingness to demand accountability. Crockett's example delivered a timeless lesson: prepare thoroughly, stand firmly, and never be intimidated into silence. In the end, as she proved, truth backed by evidence is the most powerful force of all.